On today's episode of the Locked On Knicks podcast, we wrap things up with XJ of the Hot Hand Theory pod. Continue to answer the big picture questions about the New York Knicks. On today's episode, we ask, what's the pivot and what is the actual ceiling of this core, and could more be achieved potentially with a different coach? We'll get into it all right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's up, guys? My name is Gavin Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster, and of course, the Saturday host of the Locked On NBA podcast. Yesterday, I filled in as the Monday host of the Locked On NBA podcast, so I highly encourage you to check that out when you get a chance. A really fun night of hoops. But before you do that, I want to remind you that this is Locked On Knicks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your daily podcast on the New York Knicks, giving those detailed insight on your favorite team 5 whole days a week, sometimes more. And be sure to join thousands of other Knicks fans in subscribing on both YouTube and your favorite podcast platform for the best insight on your favorite team every single day. We actually just hit 8,000 subscribers. So I want to thank all of you, because Alex and I are both immensely appreciative of those of you who watch every day, those of you who watch once a week, those of you who watch once a month. It means a lot that you're willing to listen to us ramble on about our favorite team. I also want to remind you that today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. You can download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. On today's episode, it's just what I said in the teaser. We keep talking big picture. XJ is one of my favorite people in the world to talk big picture on the Knicks on. He comes at it from a slightly different vantage point than I do, very data-based, but I think we tend to end up and usually around the same spot. And on today's show, like, he kind of moves me to a different spot, which is that the Knicks have a whole lot of potential, and the issue might not be in the roster. I think you can see where I'm going with that. So without further ado, I'll leave it to XJ to explain further on today's episode of Locked On Knicks. To that point, I have moved, for people who don't know on the pod, I moved to Phoenix this past summer. So I was at Suns Celtics this week, and they did not have Jason Tatum. And they come out and they hit 7 threes in the first 4 minutes of that game. And then throughout the second quarter, I mean, that's crazy in and of itself, and like a testament to their talent and the idea that I think they could plausibly win the East without Jason Tatum, which, as much as you want to say the Knicks have been great without Brunson, I don't think you could say about the Knicks. So I guess shout out to Brad Stevens or whatever. I'll go throw up now. But anyways, to your point, like I mentioned Caruso, but I was you just got the gears turning in my head. I watched Drew Holiday in that game just over and over again get to the rim. And I was thinking about that, and I was like, did he look like this in Milwaukee when he was like 29 versus him being 34 on the Celtics? I was like, no, he wasn't doing, like, even Brook Lopez, like, out there, he wasn't doing this in Milwaukee. And like, to your point, like, it is literally a fountain of youth for some guys. Like Drew Holiday at 34, I know the Suns don't have the best group of perimeter defenders, but like, he should not be like repeatedly just toasting guys off the dribble and getting like layup after layup after layup in the half court. And it's just the magic of what the Celtics do. And we see like it makes Peyton Pritchard put up like all-star level offensive numbers at times and look unguardable. You see Sam Hauser bursting by guys for layups. So I'm with you. And the Knicks, like, again, like they gave up a lot to have that option, and Tom Thibodeau, for whatever reason, has not totally leaned into that. And this is something like you've mentioned. I know Jeff is really driven home. Like, that's not to say like throw Josh Hart like out the window. Like he can play a substantial role off the bench with more time on the ball, where his lack of shooting is like further de-emphasized. And of course, when Josh is on the court, like the single biggest thing to me is that he shoots threes, and he shoots them confidently, whether they go in or not. And like, given that, I think we're both in agreement that it's not very likely Tom Thibodeau makes these pivots, like, he has to do that for the Knicks to at least have a chance against teams like that. But I say that just to say, like, it is further to drive home. Like, I don't think people who say like that this Knicks team doesn't make any sense is currently constructed. It is hard to imagine. Maybe it's not, because we've seen it to some extent from OG and McHale recently, but I think it is hard to imagine just how unstoppable these guys could look with Deuce McBride out there.
I think it's such an important point. And so I don't think it's like over harping on it. I think it's
Yeah.
so essential. And I think to your point about Josh Hart, and we are constantly in this tension of talking about what we think the Knicks should do versus the situation that we know is in front of us, which is that Tibbs is not going to start Deuce McBride as long as Josh Hart and all the guys are healthy. It's not going to happen. So what do we do in that situation? And you mentioned an important one. Obviously, Josh Hart has to shoot his threes to be more of a threat, so teams can't treat him the way that they do. The problem is for really smart teams like the Celtics, they're going to treat him that way really no matter what he shoots. Unless he shoots it 15 times and makes it 10 times, 3 games out of the 7, that is the way they're going to treat him regardless. So what can you do to counterbalance that? The Knicks are doing a lot of that now without Jalen Brunson, which is have Josh Hart on the ball. Much harder to have a big just completely leave him alone when he's on the ball, because you can have other guys come into screen and rolls, and now you have 2-on-1s, and that is going to allow you to the whoever's screening for him to pop and get open threes all game. And not only that, if you have him on the ball and the big is playing up, now you have some of that same optimism or optimization that you were getting from 5-out spacing, where the rim protector is lifted off of the from protecting the rim.
Yeah.
And so we've seen Josh Hart do that. His passing has been excellent in those situations. We saw him really dice up Donovan Clingan when Clingan was pressing up on him and make great passes for layups to Bridges and OG pretty much throughout the entirety of the game. And I felt like he kind of neutralized what the Blazers wanted to do with Donovan Clingan throughout a lot of it. Maybe not in the third quarter, but throughout the rest of the game, I think that they did. And so I think there are ways around it. It's just harder to do if the guy is out there for 40 minutes than if he's out there for 30 minutes, because you're not going to run your entire offense through Josh Hart for 40 or 48 minutes. But for 10, 15 minutes of a 30 that he's out there, you can definitely get away with doing it and score at a really high rate. So I think these are some things that we have to see happen. Now it's to be seen if they actually do.
Yeah. And using him as a screener is obviously is a big part of it. I think it is to your point. It is all a volume question. And at what point do you lose the thread if you are forced to adjust so much to his limitations?
Yeah.
And again, we should caveat all this, because I feel like it feels like just bagging on Josh Hart at a certain point. It is only, maybe not only against the best teams, but it is limitations that only cost you games and cost you series against literally the best teams in the NBA. And we are in that cherished place that some of us as Knicks fans thought we'd maybe never get to, where we actually get to have those conversations. So I think that is an important note. But I guess to that point, if you come out of this season and, I don't know, you lose to the Celtics in 5, you lose to the Celtics in 6, semi-competitive series, but not really. It was always kind of inevitable. Boston was going to win. Like, what is your takeaway? Like, is it as simple as, like, and maybe this is where I've been leaning for so long, like, that you need a new coach? Is there a world where you come out and you say, like, hey, we could have Mark Daigneault right now? It wouldn't stop the fact that teams can take advantage of having a Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns on the floor defensively, which we haven't talked about as much so far in this podcast. And, like, you actually need to trade Karl Anthony Towns and turn him into a different type of star, or turn him into 2 or 3 players. And I guess go back to the model you had with Dante DiVincenzo and Julius Randle that we never actually got to see with this team. Like, what I know this is an unfair question, given that, like, we don't actually know the way the Knicks might lose and what a reasonable response that is. But, like, how do you think, like, the Knicks should respond and how they should pivot if it turns out this team just isn't good enough? But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, hey, where did all my money go? I certainly have. Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. They offer surprising insights. When I started using Monarch, I realized how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. All in one convenience. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. They also offer easy collaboration, managing money with your partner smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. We also want to tell you about our good buddies over at Prize Picks baseball season is in full swing, especially if you're a Yankees fan. And there's no better way to get on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you pick more or less on at least 2-player projections. And if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash, whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, or first inning runs. Prize Picks keeps every game exciting. One of my favorite parts is building my lineup. This week, I'm picking Aaron Judge for more than 1 home run. That's an easy pick. And Shohei Ohtani for more than 1 stolen base. And it's fast and simple. Getting a lineup set up takes less than 60 seconds. And when you win, your payout is quick, safe, and secure. They also offer exclusive promos. I always take advantage of Taco Tuesday, where Prize Picks offers discounts on select player projections for even more value. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game.
Yeah, I think I'll start by saying this. Like in my day job, I work as a behavioral science researcher and practitioner. We use human-centered design to solve problems. And something that's really important is probably the most important aspect of the work is if you can't accurately identify a problem, you can't identify an effective solution. So we spend an inordinate amount of time trying to identify what the actual problem is. Because otherwise you could have the best solution in the world. If you're solving for the wrong thing, it's not going to put you in the direction that you want to go or reach your goals. So if you identify the problem for the Knicks as, this roster is not good enough, the construction doesn't actually work, they haven't had enough possessions together, they just need another year to gel. If you identify those as the problem, in my opinion, that is going to lead you in the wrong direction as far as a solution. That is going to lead you to do things like, well, Karl-Anthony Towns doesn't work for this roster, let's trade him and get someone else. Just run it back because they just need more time together. This is year 0 or year 1 of this experiment, and the Celtics have had 4 years together, and those guys, didn't gel for a long time, and they just need more time. If you identify those as the problem, that's what you're going to come up with. I don't identify those as the problem. I spend a ton of time trying to identify the problem accurately, and I think that's probably why I may come across as negative in some places because that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to figure out what's wrong, and in my opinion, what's wrong is what we've talked about all season, and it's deployment. I think this team is so talented. I think you get, you definitely try to increase the talent on the roster when it comes to that kind of 9th man, that 10th man, guys who are going to come in and be a little better than Landry Shamet. You may already have those guys on the roster if younger players develop, but in my opinion, the issue is deployment, and either you work with the coaching staff to address that, or you find a new coach to address that. And so I do think that if I were to be the decision maker, I would look at the way that they lost. If I feel like it's as a result of things like we've talked about throughout this episode in terms of how much Josh Hart plays, the way he's deployed, the way that opponents take advantage of the way that the Knicks are deployed. If I feel like it's something that's addressable with the roster that they have, to me, the only logical option is to find a new coach to deploy this team in a more effective way to optimize them. Otherwise, I think there could be some things where there are limitations, and I'm very open to this, where, Karl-Anthony Towns' rim protection is just not sufficient, and Mitchell Robinson has to play much more than we think he should, and that leads to limitations offensively to try to make up for their defense. Or, Deuce McBride is playing and getting beat off ball, so the point of attack defense is much weaker than we like. There are different ways that they could lose that would lead me to explore different solutions. But right now, with the sample that we've seen across 73 games or whatever it is at this point, that is what I'm identifying as the problem, and thusly my solution would definitely be to address that, and that being the coaching.
Yeah, I'm 100% on the same page as you. I want to see what this roster looks like. Obviously, you're not going to get Mark Dagnall, you're not going to get Joe Mazzulla specifically, but if you can find that level of coach with that level of creativity that embraces modern offensive principles, I would just, we saw the transformation Cleveland has had this year, going from JB Bickerstaff to Kenny Atkinson. And look, we'll see. Like maybe in the playoffs, it doesn't actually get them much further, and they get run through by the Boston Celtics, just like everyone else in the East potentially will be. But at least in the regular season, they look like a very different team, and one that is much more playoff proof, and one that is much more optimized than they've been in the past. And I do think like there is a lot of stuff you lose without Tom Thibodeau, and I've tried to balance that idea, like some of the player development stuff, some of the cultural stuff, like, and honestly, I think he's done quite a good job since Brunson's got hurt, with some small complaints here or there, maximizing the roster he has, and deserves a lot of credit for that. That being said, I think there is a cap ceiling on, at least in this version of the NBA in 2025, how good you can be. And I think it's clear, based on the fact that he doesn't play the team's best lineups with any kind of consistency, that optimization is not going to happen under him. I do wonder, like, if you get to a point, like in 2 years, like that, hey, like we are just not going to be good enough defensively with Cat and Jalen. And like that is what I fall back on when, like, I hear the other side of the argument. I know, like, some of the KFS guys have talked about this, where you look at the Celtics and you say, like, all right, like they are optimized, and they also have 5 guys who are very good to elite defensive players. Like, how do you beat that? Is it just that your offense is even better than theirs? And I look at Cat versus like Kristaps Porzingis and Chet Holmgren on the 2 best teams in the NBA, and I see those two-way bigs, and I'm like, all right, would this team look better if you turn Cat into, I don't know, let's just say Miles Turner and Aaron Nesmith? Or I look to Atlanta, and this is not really a stretch big, but it is like a more flexible big and a better defensive big. If you turn Cat, and I don't even know if this is a realistic trade, but into Onyeka Okongwu, Zachariah Richeche, and Trey Mann. Again, maybe I'm living in fantasy world. Maybe none of those trades would happen. You'd have to do some things with the cap to even make them work. And then you in turn, like, redistributed some touches to Mikal Bridges and some touches to OG Anunoby, because the question I keep coming back to is, can your defense be good enough, and can your offense get everything it needs out of your 4 best players? I think the offensive question is yes. Defensively, I do think there are coaches who could get more out of this team than they currently do. And to your point, like, we look at that Thunder game, like, I thought Cat was great defensively in that Thunder game. You look at last night, I thought Cat was really good overall defensively last night. So there are moments and there are times where I think he has it in there, but he is just so far along in his career. Like, I question if we will ever get it enough against the best offenses in the NBA that put the most possible stress on him and his decision-making. And that's where, like, I come back to, like, by all means, get a new coach. I wonder if this team has the same ceiling. And you know what? You can also be the Houston Rockets and say, hey, we're definitely not as good as the Celtics. That doesn't mean we can't beat them in a 7-game series. And I if I had to guess, but I'll let you speak on it, like that is to some extent your theory on, like, on the Knicks can get close enough that with some randomness they could beat Boston, with some randomness they could beat an OKC.
I think that's where I'm at. And you mentioned, talked about like a Chet Holmgren or like a Kristaps Porzingis situation. I think, like, yes, it would be more ideal to have a guy who can shoot threes at a really elite level for a big, and then also protect the rim at an elite level. That would be the ideal situation. I hope that, our audience listening to this now doesn't take me the wrong way and think that I think that Cat is the most ideal foundational big to have in a championship team. But outside of that, that's not going to happen here. Like, the Knicks are not going to get Chet Holmgren. The Knicks are not going to get Porzingis. And even if they did get Porzingis, honestly, his health is like such a major concern that I don't even know if you want to deal with all of that. But they have Karl-Anthony Towns, and I think they have enough to win. And something that I've noticed, or something that I want to point out for the post-Brunson injury Knicks, is that the way that they've maintained their differential and have even increased it a bit is that they're 7th in defense. They're 7th in defense in the league in the 12 games that Brunson's been out, with a 110.6 point defensive rating, 110 points per 100 possessions. And how have they done it? Have they just been stifling everything at the rim somehow because Mitchell Robinson is playing a ton of minutes or something like that? Well, actually, a big difference for the Knicks is the rim frequency. So when Brunson was on the court, opponents were 25th in the league at the amount of shots that they allowed at the rim. 34% of the opponent's shots were at the rim. Now they've jumped up to 15th in the league. So middle of the league in the shots that they allow at the rim, 31% of their opponent shots are allowed at the rim. This is from, in my opinion, perimeter defense. This is from point of attack defense. This is the payoff that you get from swapping Jalen Brunson for Miles McBride, or even Jalen Brunson for Campaign, guys who can put up a little bit more resistance in terms of allowing guards to get deep penetration, which generates open threes for the opponents, as well as open shots at the rim. And if you're reducing that rim frequency while still having Karl-Anthony Towns for playing a ton of those minutes, to me, that shows that there's an ability to have this defense be better, even with Karl-Anthony Towns on the court. And I honestly think that, people have talked a lot about the Miles McBride substitute for Josh Hart as reducing the effectiveness of the defense, but I disagree. I think the defense would get better. And a lot of that reason is because now you have on the perimeter 3 guys in McBride, Bridges, and OG who can really stifle rim penetration and allow Cat's weaknesses not to be as much of a disadvantage as they are currently on the court. So I think there are other options that you can go to. And I do think you need to really just completely lean into the spacing, completely lean into Karl-Anthony Towns' amazing strengths in terms of his deep 3 shooting and his ability to really light it up from the 3-point line. And that is how you get to that place where you can beat teams that may be a little bit better than you, because you're not going to get that perfect player to swap in for Karl-Anthony Towns. And if you do something like Cat for Miles Turner and Aaron Nesmith or something like that, I think the Pacers get better in that situation, because I just believe they'll lean into that run and gun style and shoot even more than they currently do. I think for the Knicks, that's just not going to do it. As far as Turner's rim protection is not sufficient to make up for what Cat can do from the 3-point line. And now you're kind of playing both sides instead of leaning into what your strength really is. And so I think there's significant drawbacks to any deal that you can make for Karl-Anthony Towns, such that you could show me one. Maybe you could show me one, Gavin, or someone can show one that would really benefit the Knicks overall on the net. I'm not opposed to that happening. To pull one off, I think I can't come up with one in my mind. And so I think you have to lean into what your strengths are.
All right, guys, we want to tell you about our good friends over at Game Time. There's nothing like watching basketball live. The energy of the crowd, the sound of sneakers on the hardwood, and maybe even a celebrity sighting courtside. At MSG, there's no maybe about it. You will see some celebs. If you want to catch a game in person, Game Time makes getting tickets easier than ever. Game Time's new feature, Game Time Picks, filters out all the fluff and shows you only the best deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time scrolling through thousands of tickets. They offer easy ticket shopping. I just checked the Game Time app, and there are amazing deals on some huge matchups. My favorite feature is they highlight the super deals, which gives you the best bang for your buck. And they also offer peace of mind with seat fees before you buy, no surprise fees, and a lowest price guarantee. You can book with total confidence. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Yeah, I think it's a great point, and I maybe should have mentioned this when I mentioned those trades. It is trying to fix a problem without correctly identifying. And you're saying, all right, if the Knicks are going to be limited by Tom Thibodeau in these ways, like how can you like coddle Tom Thibodeau? And it's this is an exaggeration, to be clear, but it goes back to don't negotiate with basketball terrorists, right? Like just like have a coach who is flexible and is open, and like a Mark Daigneault, again, coach, I got to remind people, coach the most successful team in the league. One, I would argue, does not have like the sheer offensive firepower that the New York Knicks do. Clearly is a deeper team, but I don't even think substantially deeper in terms of overall talent, certainly in terms of defensive talent and point of attack guys. I say all that to say, like you see what the best coaches in the NBA do. They lean into 5-out spacing. They lean into shooting a lot of threes. They lean into something you guys always talk about, like experimentation and playing as many different lineups as possible. That's something that Oklahoma City has done better than any team in the league. And I think there is a world where Cat is optimized. And to me, and it's what you were getting at, it is as a play finisher. And if you look at his strengths instead of his weaknesses, which I think I've been too guilty at times this year of looking at his weaknesses, and you say, hey, like he's never going to be Julius Randle in terms of his ability to draw to and pass it out. He's been a little bit better these last few games. We've seen him kicking out of drives, which is really, really encouraging to me, because against Boston in particular, like he just plays with blinders on at times. And if you could just every once in a while, like spray it out, that would be great. But if you accept that's not always an option, I think it's on Jalen Brunson, who is a little bit more inherently flexible, to say, hey, JB, watch some Tyler Kolek film, watch some campaign film, and see these guys' willingness to just make the simplest possible basketball play to Karl-Anthony Towns. It's something Josh Hart does all the time. Like when Cat is trailing on a fast break, I have not looked at the numbers, but I would imagine the points per possession are it is one of the most efficient plays in the NBA, because it seems like every time he either gets a dunk or he gets a three when he gets the basketball, but it's on the point guard to look for that simple toss back. It's on Jalen Brunson and pick and pop to look for that simple toss back. Karl-Anthony Towns has made just 7 corner threes all year. Some of that is where he's located on the court. Some of that is his preference of where he's located on the court. But I do think that stat is symbolic and a microcosm of some of the issues Jalen has had just making simple plays, making simple passes to him. Shout out to Prez over at the Strickland. He shouted that out over and over again. But I think if you lean into that, and to your point, like Cat is not Kristaps Porzingis or Chet Holmgren. Chet Holmgren and at least at this point, and Kristaps Porzingis are also not Karl-Anthony Towns in terms of like how incredible of a driver he is, how incredible of a finisher he is around the rim, in terms of his like passing ability, at least from a standstill. And if you were to optimize all of that, like there are things he gives you that really work. And to your point on Deuce McBride, and this is my last point, then I'll let you take us home. He is, or B-Ball Index had the number that he was a top 3 screen navigator in the NBA. I don't have a membership, so I don't know where he is today. But to that point, like, and this is something that Fred Katz noted on the Knicks Film School pod, he allows you to like have like near perfect screen navigation, which limits the number of times that Cat just gets torched and dropped. And I think that like elevates the entire defense, because then, and this is also a point Fred made, you get to move Mikal off the ball. You let him be more of an off-ball playmaker. He has enough energy to do what he did last night, where like for a 5-minute stretch, he said, "Hey, Shaedon Sharpe, you're not getting anything. Like, you think you're by me? I'm blocking you. You think you're creating a shot? Nope, I'm forcing a pass out of bounds because I just shut down 5 straight moves from you." And you empower him to do that. You empower OG to be an off-ball playmaker defensively, which we've seen recently to great success, where he's seemingly getting 5 fast break dunks a game. And I think putting Deuce in there defensively opens all that up, because Josh Hart, as good as he is, as hard as he plays, just does not really bring that element defensively in the same way Deuce does. And then you just hope, and most teams in the NBA do, you have someone you can hide Jalen Brunson on. And if it's the Celtics and they say, "Hey, we're going to hunt Jalen Brunson," like, all right, if you're going to divert your offense to just go at him, like we saw last game, they actually slowed up a little bit when they did that, even when it was Jason Tatum, even when it was Jaylen Brown attacking Brunson. So I know I'm throwing a ton at you, but all that is to say, like, there are solutions on this roster. And I think it's actually very, very nice for me to talk to you, because sometimes I get to a point where I don't think that. I talk to you, I'm like, no, wait, like I'm kind of like getting an electric shock. I'm like, there actually are answers here that could work.
Oh, there are solutions on the roster, and you pointed to some incredible ones. I mean, at the end of the day, you mitigate the weaknesses of your best players. That's what you have to do. And if we're saying Cat is a weak drop defender or a weak rim protector, which I believe both of those to be the case, it's not, well, cast them into the moon. Like, it's how do we mitigate those weaknesses so we get the value, all the strengths that he brings, and optimize him as much as possible. We're talking about what you just mentioned. Deuce McBride would help Cat so much defensively, because if you have a weak drop defender, what better way to help neutralize that weakness than having one of the best screen navigators in the league play with that guy? You mitigate the advantage that the offense is trying to create. With Jalen Brunson, you want to bring him into the action every time. I would love if the Knicks were to integrate some pre-switching principles where they kind of get Brunson off of the man who's going to go and do that screen. But even that notwithstanding, if you want to, like you said, if you want to go ISO against Jalen Brunson every single possession on the perimeter, you can do that. If you want to go ISO against Karl-Anthony Towns every single possession on the perimeter against a big wing, you can do that. It's not about how can we completely shut down the opponent's offense. It's about how can we score more than the opponent. That's what it's about. And so it's always what you get on the net. And I think if you are going to use Karl-Anthony Towns and get the best of what he has to offer, you mitigate his weaknesses. You don't neuter his offensive impact by continually put him in worse spacing environments. And so I think there are tons of solutions. To your point also about, Dagnall and the experimentation, I think that's so critical. And what I would say to Knicks fans is, if you believe this to be, sort of the year 0 year where, they're not expected to contend right away, and this is just setting the foundation, then experimentation needed to be a critical piece of what you were doing this season. You needed to say, okay, we're looking at the Thunder. Why is a guy like AJ Mitchell, a 38th overall pick, a second round draft pick before he got injured, was a critical piece of what they're doing over there with the deep roster that they have. They have really strong players, basically 1 through 12. AJ Mitchell was critical to what that team is doing. A 38th pick right away, right out the gates was playing. And that's because Dagnall threw him out there and said, whoa, this guy's good, and just let him continue to play. He also played other rookies. Those guys like Dylan Jones wasn't as good, and they haven't played as much since then. But you have to try those things early on in the season. We're just now seeing Tyler Kolek be able to step foot on the court. And to me, that's just a disservice. So experimentation has to be critical to what you're trying to do early in the season. At this point, it's too late for that. Everything you do has to be about the 2025 playoffs. But I just think that there are solutions on the roster. There are things that could have been tried. There are things that should continue to be tried moving forward. And, I just don't think that they have the infrastructure in place to be able to do that with the coaching staff that they do. But we'll see. I could be wrong. And if I'm wrong, hopefully, Gavin, you'll invite me back on here to do a mea culpa and apologize to Tibbs and all the fans. But otherwise, I don't envision it happening. And I hope I'm wrong, and I hope it does happen. But we'll see.
Yeah, we can't emphasize that enough. We both hope we're wrong. But I do think that to bring this full circle, when I say, like, when I got asked that question on Locked On Cavs, like, what could happen to make this season a success, and I'm almost like, well, we're almost past the point of no return. Like, it is that lack of experimentation. That's kind of what I'm getting at. Like Tibbs is like that. It's sort of the irony of it is that he actually does come up with good solutions, but only when he's forced to, and then he doesn't stick with them when he's no longer forced to. So that would be my one sentence thesis of why I am out on him, and I think this team could look better with a different coach. But you know what? If Boston, I think we're perfectly set up in a way, because if they compete with Boston and we're wrong, that's great. If they don't compete with Boston, like, I think the move for Leon Rose to make is very obvious, and we'll see if he does it. Allegedly, he was ready to do it 3 years ago, so we'll see. But on happier tidings, can you please tell everyone where they can find the fantastic Hot Hand Theory podcast and continue to be educated on the Knicks and also the NBA writ large?
Absolutely. Yeah. YouTube, we're Hot Hand Theory everywhere. Somehow we've been able to manage to get that IP everywhere. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, like like Gavin said, my co-host and I, Jeff, Freudian slip. As you can see, I'm used to just saying as Jeff said, but yeah, as Gavin said, me and my co-host Jeff, we break down the NBA from an analytical perspective and bring into film into play and talk about the entire league as well as the Knicks. So you can find us anywhere at Hot Hand Theory.
I say it every time you come on. It is an absolute must listen, must watch if you want to be a smarter Knicks fan and a smarter NBA fan. They just did a fantastic episode breaking down something I always think every year until they inevitably get hurt. Why the Los Angeles Clippers are one of the great threats in the Western Conference. But until next time, check out XJ on Hot Hand Theory. Check us out over here on Locked On Knicks. We'll talk to you soon.